My name is Nancy Reynolds. I am 65 years old, and I never imagined the day would come when my own son would shove me to the ground because I refused to give him money. What he did not know was that I had a secret that would make him regret everything. I live in a small town outside Asheville, North Carolina. My house is modest, surrounded by tomato plants, wildflowers, and a few old oak trees that have been here longer than I have. Every morning I wake up at 5:30, make black coffee without sugar, feed my chickens, and sit on the porch to watch the sunrise. It is my quiet moment, the only time of day that still feels peaceful. I have been a widow for almost 9 years. My husband, Robert, died of a sudden heart attack, leaving me with a large piece of land he inherited from his parents. It was almost 20 acres, but it had been neglected for years. The roof leaked, the fences had fallen, and the soil was covered with weeds. Keeping that land was more of a burden than a blessing, but I held on to it out of loyalty to Robert's memory. For years, my children, Jacob and Melissa, built their lives in the city while I stayed here, surviving on my small savings and whatever I could earn cleaning houses and selling home-cooked meals on weekends. I never asked for help because I have always been proud. My children had their own responsibilities, and I believed I could handle mine. Everything changed one afternoon when a man in a gray suit showed up at my door. He introduced himself as a representative of a construction company. They were developing a new housing project nearby and wanted to buy my land. He offered $190,000. I nearly dropped the coffee mug from my hand. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. That night, I could not sleep. I walked around the old property, remembering how Robert used to talk about building a small orchard there. I thought about all the years of struggle, about the broken fences and the endless repairs, and I asked myself if holding on to that land was worth the pain anymore. And then I remembered my sister Susan. She died 5 years ago from cancer. Before she passed, she made me promise that if I ever had the chance, I would help other women who could not afford their treatments. For years, I kept that promise folded in my heart like an old letter. Maybe now, I thought, it was time to open it. After 2 weeks of sleepless nights and silent prayers, I decided to sell. The papers were signed within a month. When I saw the balance in my bank account, I cried, not from greed but from the realization that I finally had the means to live without fear of running out of money. I told no one, not even my neighbor Grace, who has been like a sister to me for 30 years. I felt that the less people knew, the safer I would be until I decided exactly what to do with it. Life went on as usual. I drank my morning coffee, tended my garden, and smiled to myself, thinking of the future I could now afford. But as the sun went down on a Thursday evening, I noticed a white car pulling into my driveway. It was my daughter Melissa. She never visited on weekdays. The smile she gave me as she stepped out of her car was the same one she used as a child whenever she wanted something. And right then, as the sunset painted the sky orange and red, I felt a chill deep inside. Something told me peace was about to end. Melissa walked toward me, her heels sinking into the dirt as if the earth itself resisted her presence. She wore a yellow dress I had never seen before, and carried a large handbag that looked expensive. "Mom," she said with a bright smile, "I heard from Mrs. Grant down the road that you sold Dad's property. I'm so happy for you." Her tone was sweet, too sweet, like honey masking something bitter. I led her inside and poured her a glass of cold water with ice. We sat in the living room, she on the sofa, me in my rocking chair that once belonged to my grandmother. I could tell she was nervous by the way she tapped her fingernails against the glass. "So," she began, pretending to look around the room, "I imagine it must have been for quite a bit of money, right? That land was valuable." I didn't answer right away. "It was a fair sale," I finally said. "Enough for me to fix the house and have some peace." Melissa leaned forward, eyes shining. "Mom, you can trust me. I just want to make sure you're managing everything safely. A big amount like that can be dangerous if you don't invest it right." Her words sounded caring, but her expression reminded me of a salesperson rather than a daughter. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said quietly, "but I've already made plans." She forced a laugh. "Plans? Mom, you're 65. You don't need that much money. Why not help your family? Ryan's business is struggling. We could use just a small loan, maybe $20,000 or $30,000. I promise we'll pay you back." I looked at her carefully. "Melissa, that money is not for lending. I worked my whole life to earn security, not to hand it away." Her smile faded instantly. "You don't trust your own daughter?" It's not about trust, I said calmly. It's about boundaries. I'm finally doing something for myself. Melissa crossed her arms, her voice rising. For yourself? What are you going to do, Mom? Buy a new car, travel the world? At your age, you don't need all that. You could help Brian get the business back on its feet. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. At my age, I've learned that peace of mind is worth more than any investment. She rolled her eyes. This is ridiculous. Dad's property belonged to the whole family. It's not fair that you keep it all. The word fair cut deep. Where was fairness when I was cleaning other people's floors after your father died? When I sold home-cooked meals just to keep the lights on? None of you offered to help then? Melissa looked down, her voice softer but still defensive. We didn't know things were that bad. You didn't want to know, I said quietly. You were too busy with your own lives. The silence stretched between us, thick as fog. Finally, she stood up and adjusted her handbag. Fine, Mom. Do whatever you want. But don't be surprised if people think you've lost your mind. When she left, the sound of her car fading down the road felt heavier than thunder. I sat alone on my porch as the evening wind cooled my skin. Somewhere deep inside, I knew that this was only the beginning. The peace I had dreamed of was already slipping through my fingers. The next morning, I tried to convince myself that Melissa's visit had just been a bad dream. I watered my tomato plants, fed the chickens, and sat on the porch with my coffee, pretending nothing had changed. But something inside me had the quiet didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like the pause before a storm. 3 days later, that storm arrived. A black pickup truck pulled into my driveway, the sound of its engine breaking the calm morning air. I recognized it immediately, my son Jacob's truck. He climbed out, heavy-built, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans that hadn't seen an iron in years. The smell of beer hit me before he even reached the porch. Hey, Mom, he said with a forced smile. Melissa told me about the good news, the land sale. Of course she did, I muttered, motioning for him to come inside. Melissa followed him, carrying a folder under her arm. They sat together on the sofa, side by side, like they used to when they were kids plotting some mischief. Only this time their expressions were cold and rehearsed. Mom, Jacob began, we think it's time we talk about what to do with the money. There's nothing to talk about, I said, keeping my voice even. The money is mine, and I already have plans for it. Melissa's tone sharpened. You can't be serious, Mom. That property was part of Dad's inheritance. It belongs to all of us. I looked at her, then at Jacob. When your father passed away, everything went to me legally. I paid the taxes, fixed the fences, and kept that land from being taken by the bank. Neither of you lifted a finger to help. Jacob leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. That may be true, but we're still his children. We have a right to what's ours. What's yours? I repeated. That land was a burden for years. Now that it's worth something, suddenly it's yours. He slammed his hand on the coffee table, making the glass of water tremble. Don't talk to me like I'm some kind of thief, Mom. We just want what's fair. Fair, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Fair would have been visiting your mother once in a while. Fair would have been asking if I had enough money to buy food. You only show up when you smell money. Melissa stood up, trying to regain control. Mom, please, you're overreacting. We're just asking for help. No, I said firmly. You're demanding what you think you deserve, without remembering what I endured to get here. Jacob rose to his feet, towering over me. His face was red, his breathing heavy. If you don't share, we'll find another way to make you. For a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who ran to me when he scraped his knee, the one who used to kiss my hand goodnight. But that boy was gone. The man standing in front of me was a stranger, fueled by greed and resentment. Get out of my house, I whispered, pointing toward the door. Both of you. Melissa's eyes burned with anger. This isn't over, Mom, she said coldly. You'll regret this. They walked out without looking back. The sound of their car engines faded, but the echo of their words stayed in my chest like a knife twisting slowly. I sank into my rocking chair, holding my breath until the tears came. It's one thing to lose money, I thought, but it's something far worse to lose your children to greed. That evening, I sat in the dark, staring at the phone on my kitchen table. I half expected it to ring, maybe an apology, maybe a threat, but it stayed silent. Only the sound of crickets outside filled the air, reminding me how alone I really was. By 9 o'clock, my nerves were so tense that I decided to call my neighbor and oldest friend, Grace Miller. She lived just 2 houses down the road and had been like a sister to me since we were both young mothers. When she heard my trembling voice, she didn't hesitate. "Pack a bag and come here tonight," she said. "You shouldn't stay there alone." I grabbed my purse, a few clothes, and the small metal box where I kept all the documents from the land sale. Then I walked under the dim streetlight toward Grace's house. The night air was cool, but I was sweating. I locked the door twice before leaving, even though I had never locked it more than once in my life. Grace welcomed me with open arms and a hot cup of tea. "Nancy," she said softly, "I've known your kids since they were little, but this is not normal. You have to protect yourself." Her words broke something inside me. For years I had defended my children, made excuses for their distance, their selfishness, their silence. But now I had to face the truth: they weren't acting like family anymore. As we sat at her kitchen table, I finally told Grace everything about the sale, about the visit, about the threats. When I finished, she stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she asked gently, "And what are you planning to do with the money, Nancy? You're not the kind of woman to hoard it." I looked down at my hands, twisting the edge of my napkin. "I was planning to start a foundation," I said, "for women who can't afford cancer treatment. It was Susan's dream before she died. I promised her I'd do it if I ever could." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Nancy," she whispered, "that's beautiful. And they have no idea?" "None," I said. "If they did, they'd twist it somehow, make it about themselves." That night I slept on Grace's sofa, though sleep wasn't the right word. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floor, made me flinch. I dreamed that Jacob and Melissa were standing over my bed, arguing about my will, their voices echoing like ghosts. The next morning I returned home to feed my chickens and check on the house. The moment I reached the gate, my heart dropped. The front door's lock had scratches all around it, and the flowers by the porch were crushed as if someone had stepped on them. My garden soil had fresh boot prints, large ones. Inside nothing was missing, but everything was slightly off. The chairs were moved, my drawers half open, papers scattered, and the metal box from under my bed had been pulled out and left sitting in plain view. I knew immediately that someone had been searching for something: the documents, or worse, the bank information. I sat down slowly, trembling, and dialed Grace again. "They were here," I said. "Someone broke in." "Call the police, Nancy," she urged. "Right now." But before I could, I heard a knock at the door. My heart nearly stopped. When I opened it, I found my late husband's cousin, Ethan Turner, standing on the porch, his face pale and worried. "Nancy," he said quietly, "we need to talk. I was at the bar last night, and I overheard something you need to know." My knees went weak. "What did you hear, Ethan?" He swallowed hard. "Jacob was there, drunk, talking to two men. He said they were going to find a way to take control of your money. They mentioned something about getting a doctor to declare you mentally unfit." For a long moment I couldn't breathe. Declare me unfit? Ethan nodded. "They're serious, Nancy. You have to act fast." And in that instant I realized the storm wasn't coming, it was already here. After Ethan left, I sat for a long time, staring at the sunlight creeping across my kitchen floor. I had raised my children to be honest, hardworking, and kind. How had it come to this? How had the love I poured into them turned into a weapon against me? I called my lawyer, Mr. Hayes, the same man who had helped with the land sale. When I told him everything, he didn't sound surprised. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, "I've seen this happen before. You need to protect yourself immediately. Go to the sheriff's office and file for a restraining order. Also, I'll have your doctor prepare a mental competency evaluation. That way no one can question your sanity." That afternoon I did exactly that. The sheriff listened carefully, nodding as I spoke, and promised to patrol near my property for a few nights. I felt a small sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, this nightmare could still be stopped. But the very next day, the nightmare came to my doorstep. It was late morning. I was trimming the rose bushes when I heard the sound of a car engine, then another. Two vehicles pulled into my driveway. The first was Jacob's black truck. The second was a dark sedan I didn't recognize. My heart began to pound. Jacob got out first, followed by two large men in leather jackets. Melissa stepped out of the passenger seat of the truck, her face pale and anxious. "Mom," she called out, "can we talk?" I stayed where I was, holding the pruning shears tightly in my hand. "About what?" I asked. Jacob stepped forward. "We're here to settle this once and for all. Sign the papers and nobody gets hurt." I blinked. "What papers?" "The transfer of funds," Melissa said softly, avoiding my eyes. "It's just temporary, Mom. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. My hands started to shake. You brought strangers to my home to threaten me? Jacob smirked. They're just witnesses. Now stop being dramatic and sign. I took a slow step back, toward the house. Leave now, or I'll call the police. He laughed. Go ahead. Tell them your own kids came to visit. Who do you think they'll believe? The drunk son or the crazy old lady? I didn't answer. My cell phone was in my pocket, already dialing 911 as I slipped behind the oak tree near the porch. My voice was barely above a whisper as I told the dispatcher my address. Within minutes, sirens echoed down the road. Jacob turned toward the sound, his face twisting in panic. You called the cops? He yelled. Officers, I shouted as two deputies ran up the driveway. These are my children, and they came here with strangers to threaten me for money. One of the men tried to run, but the officers blocked him. Jacob spun around, furious. Mom, why would you do this? He shouted and stepped forward, grabbing my arm. We're your family. Let me go, Jacob, I said, my voice breaking. You stopped being my family the moment you raised your hand against me. He shoved me hard. The world tilted. I hit the ground, pain exploding through my side. I heard Grace's voice screaming from somewhere she had seen everything from her porch. The officers grabbed Jacob, forcing him down, handcuffing him as I gasped for air. Melissa stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Oh God, Jacob, what have you done? The last thing I remember before they lifted me into the ambulance was the look on my son's face, a mixture of rage, shock, and regret. The look of a man who had just destroyed his own soul. The next few weeks passed in a blur of hospital lights and painkillers. The doctors told me I had 2 fractured ribs and heavy bruising on my back, but I was lucky. Grace visited every day, bringing flowers from my garden and updates about the case. Jacob's been arrested, she said one afternoon, sitting by my bed. They charged him with elder abuse and assault. The other 2 men are in custody too. One of them already confessed that Jacob hired them to intimidate you. I closed my eyes. I didn't feel victory, only a deep sadness. And Melissa, I asked. She's cooperating with the police, Grace said gently. They won't send her to jail, but she's getting community service. She told them she's sorry. When I was finally discharged, I went straight to my lawyer's office instead of home. Mr. Hayes helped me secure my finances, transfer everything into a protected trust, and officially file the documents for something I had almost forgotten, the Susan Hope Foundation. It took months to set up, but by spring the foundation was real. We partnered with a local hospital to help women pay for cancer treatments they could not afford. The first woman we helped was a single mother named Denise, who hugged me with tears in her eyes and whispered, "You saved my life." For the first time in a long while I felt at peace. My pain had turned into purpose. My sister's promise had come to life. About a year later, I received a letter from the prison. The handwriting was shaky, the paper folded carefully. It was from Jacob. Mom, it began, I think about that day every night. I see your face when I pushed you and I wish I could take it back. I lost my job, my family, and myself long before I lost you. I'm trying to change. Please don't hate me forever. I read it twice, then folded it slowly. I didn't know if I could forgive him, but I prayed he would learn what real strength meant, not the kind that demands, but the kind that repents. A full year has passed since that terrible day. The scars on my ribs have faded, though sometimes they ache when the rain comes. The garden has grown wild again, but I don't mind. It reminds me that even after being torn apart, life finds a way to bloom. Melissa visits me once a week now. She volunteers at a senior center as part of her community service, but I know she's doing more than just fulfilling a sentence. She's trying to make amends. Sometimes she brings lunch, sometimes she just sits quietly beside me on the porch. We don't talk much about the past, we don't need to. The silence between us has turned from painful to peaceful. Jacob is still in prison. His letters arrive every month, each one filled with apologies, memories, and promises of change. I don't always answer, but I read every word. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't a single moment. It's a process, one that takes time and courage. The Susan Hope Foundation is still growing. We've helped more than 50 women so far, and every time I see one of them ring the bell to mark the end of their treatment, I think of my sister and whisper, "We did it, Susan." When I look back now, I don't see revenge. I see survival. I see a woman who refused to be broken, even when everything around her fell apart. Money can be earned and lost, but dignity once surrendered takes a lifetime to rebuild. So protect your peace, no matter who tries to steal it from you. Love your children, but don't let that love blind you to the truth. And if this story touched your heart, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Like, share, and tell me your city in the comments below. Let's see how far Nancy's story can travel, and may it remind us all that it's never too late to stand tall again. It's been 2 years now since everything changed. I'm 67, and the woman I see in the mirror feels like someone new, someone stronger, freer, and finally unafraid. The little house that once echoed with tension is now a place of calm. The walls are freshly painted in pale blue, the color of peace. My mornings still start with coffee and the sound of birds outside the window, but there's a difference now. The silence feels comforting, not lonely. Jacob will be released in a few months. I don't know what will happen when he walks out of those gates, but I do know this: I'll meet him as his mother, not his victim. Whether forgiveness blooms or not will depend on what he does with his freedom. Melissa has rebuilt her life. She divorced Aaron, got a stable job, and is raising her children with humility. Sometimes she helps at the foundation, organizing events or visiting women in treatment. Every time I see her there, I'm reminded that redemption isn't about words, it's about showing up, again and again, until trust quietly returns. The Susan Hope Foundation has become my legacy. Each new life it touches fills the void my children's betrayal left behind. Pain turned into purpose, and purpose into healing, not just for me, but for the women who once thought hope was out of reach. If you've ever been betrayed by those you love, remember Nancy's story. Pain can destroy you, or it can refine you. The choice is yours. Stand tall, protect your heart, and when life tests you, answer it not with anger, but with strength. This is Nancy Reynolds, and this was my story. If it reached you today, please like, share, and comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, because stories like this remind us, no matter what we lose, we can always rebuild ourselves. If you've watched this far, thank you truly. Stories like Nancy Reynolds aren't just fiction. They reflect the silent battles many parents, especially mothers, face every day, choosing between love and self-respect, between forgiveness and survival. Nancy's journey wasn't about vengeance. It was about reclaiming her voice after being silenced by those who should have protected it. And maybe that's the hardest kind of courage, standing up to your own family when love turns into manipulation. Every choice she made, from selling the land to founding the Susan Hope Foundation, came from a place of quiet strength. She didn't seek revenge through anger, she built justice through dignity. Her story reminds us that true revenge isn't destruction, it's rebuilding your life so beautifully that those who broke you can no longer recognize the ruins. Somewhere out there, a woman is watching this with tears in her eyes, realizing she deserves peace too. If that woman is you, know this: you're not weak for saying enough. You're not selfish for wanting to protect what you've earned. You're simply human, and you deserve to be safe, respected, and free. So to every viewer I ask, what would you have done in Nancy's place? Would you have forgiven Jacob? Would you have trusted Melissa again? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if this story touched your heart, hit the like button so it can reach more people who might need to hear it. This has been The Art of Revenge, where every story reminds us that sometimes the sweetest justice is simply living in peace. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are never too old and never too broken to begin again.